how broken is the system? And I know if every year we see turnover, every year it seems like the same question is raised. Every year, for some reason, the conversation gets shifted to, well, does the Rooney Rule, even work? And it's so far away from the crux of the issue, which is that black coordinators, black candidates to move up in the coaching ranks. And you coached in the NFL as well as played. I don't know how much you've seen it up close and personal, but it just seems like it's such a broken system that not only do we deal with the issue every year, but it seems conveniently that the conversation gets shifted away into whether or not a rule works or whether or not we're even dealing with this issue in the first place.
Well, first and foremost, I want to tip my cap to the late Art Rooney for even entering the Rooney Rule to begin with, because that rule allowed a lot of coaches who are coaching now, minority coaches, to at least get an opportunity to interview. Now, the problem is that that's where it stops, because when you look at Todd Bowles, who had an interview with the Detroit Lions, he automatically turned it down because he knew exactly what it was. He knew he wasn't going to get the job. And he's like, well, I got to prepare for Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. I don't want to spend my time, talking about a team that's not going to really bring me on. And they're just doing it just to check a box. So there's a problem with the system. And, Troy Vincent, I give him a lot of credit for trying to nudge the league to come up with something better. But even with what they came up with, it's still not great. So the idea is that if you promote, or someone on your staff is promoted to maybe a higher level, maybe a GM or head coach, the team that person is leaving, they're rewarded with a third round draft pick. And it sounds great because the incentive is there. But to me, it's just like, why do we need to put incentive in place for coaches or GMs who are adequate enough to even interview and get the job? To me, it's like they need to just tear it all down. But I'll tell you this, as I tried to get into coaching, the one thing that I constantly heard was that, well, former players don't want to work. And I was like, well, who came up with that idea? And it seemed as though it is something that was created to shut out former players, because we see a lot of guys who never played the game. And that's not to say that in order to be a great coach, you need to have played the game. Not true. You just want to be viewed as equal to someone else. And it just seems like, even though no one's ever said it, but it seems like it comes down to the color of your skin. Because why is it in this hiring cycle, and even last year, Eric Bieniemy doesn't have a job? Deshaun Watson has to go ham on social media, and there's a strained relationship with he and the Houston Texans organization, because he say, hey, look, here's a list of guys I would like for you to go interview as head coach and GM, and they don't do it, right? It's just like, where's your level of influence if you are Deshaun Watson, being an African-American quarterback and the best player on the Texans team? And even in Philly, Deuce Staley has been there forever. Right. And now you go hire the offensive coordinator for the Colts to be the head coach? No, that dude is tired of being overlooked. A lot of minority coaches are tired of being overlooked, but here's the thing. We're not put in that offensive pipeline. Most of the coaches I know coach on the defensive side of the ball, and some of them never get the opportunity to be a defensive coordinator. So right now, there's only two guys in that pipeline on offense, Eric Bieniemy and Byron Leftwich, both of which are in the Super Bowl right now. And none of those guys have head coaching jobs.
I want to follow up on a lot that you just laid out, but let's just minimize it real quick, or localize it, I should say, real quick to Deuce, because I think that there are depths to this that a lot of people don't get. And I see it on social media where, Deuce had to take that job, that lateral job in Detroit. Clearly nobody else wanted him. That validates the Eagles not moving him up to a head coach. But that's part of the optics. That's part of the problem, in my opinion, in how I see it, Nick, which is, if you, in a case of Deuce, and I imagine that Deuce is far from the only person who went through this, routinely have a carrot dangled over your head about, hey, you're our guy. You played here. We love you. The locker room loves you. The fans love you. Don't worry. We got you next time. Next time it comes, you get passed up. Same thing. Next time comes, you get passed up. you've lost years. You've lost the ability to go out and find a new job and interview. And I think what happens is this same organization that dangles the carrot then controls the narrative about how, quote, ill prepared or ill equipped you may be to coach in the first place. And it's just like a doubling down of, and I don't know another word to use here, it's a doubling down of the oppression of the rise of a certain candidate in this game. And it's just, it's ridiculous that we're still having this conversation.
Well, basically, here's what it boils down to. Here's the perfect word. It's called justification, right? It gives every reason as to why you did not hire this guy. And just think in Deuce's case, he decided to make a lateral movement to go to Detroit, right? Most people say, well, why would you do that when you can stay in Philly? That's how bad it was for him. I mean, he watched Doug Peterson come in and he was hired as the head coach. He tolerated it. He went and did his job. But for this to happen again after you fire Peterson and then, you look at Deuce, I don't even get a sniff at the head coaching job. And I've been here. So you can tell me all day, you like me as a player. People in the locker room cherish you. We cherish you in the organization. But we cherish you enough to be in the position that you're in, not to be in a position where we view you as moving up. And that's a problem. And when I look at this whole diversity issue in the NFL, we got the same thing going on here in Denver. It's just like, well, we want to bring in more diversity. Well, it's like, I said, well, what does that really mean, right? Because for me, the way I look at diversity, it's not just, minority coaches. Let's bring some women in as well. Okay, well, we have women sprinkled out. Sarah Thomas, who I met in San Francisco during my coaching time, she's an official, right? We have female trainers. We have female assistant coaches, but none of those females are in the pipeline to become scouts or GMs. And we just watched Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball now has their first female GM. So if we want to talk diversity, we have to look at the whole scope of things.
Nick, I got a couple more. I want to get one last thought on the coaching issue and the problematic just practices of hiring in the NFL. How much do you think players can/should be the motivators for change within the game? Because we're already, as you mentioned, at a point where unfortunately teams have been incentivized to look at candidates that normally don't get a look. Is this an extreme measure now where we've seen NBA players and even times in the NFL where players have stood up for something, a cause, a social cause, this clearly being one of them? Are we at that point where you think this at least should be explored?
Well, yeah. Look at the Brooklyn Nets, for instance, right? You had Kyrie and KD advocate for Steve Nash, right? And we know in the NBA, that's a players-driven league, right?
Right.
Their PA is the strongest of any professional PA, and they dictate a lot of what happened. A lot of that should take place with NFL organization. Go to your key players and get their thoughts. Now, it may not be the decision, the final decision that helps you decide what you're going to do, but at least you're taking in input as far as what they want. And I can tell you the reason San Francisco was able to turn the season around and go from 4-12 to going to the Super Bowl, because Jed York, John Lynch, and Kyle Shanahan were all on the same page. They created a culture where their players had an opportunity to have some input as to what was going on. And hopefully owners now understanding the current climate, that things need to change. You need to have a policy where jobs are available for everyone, and it goes to the best candidate, not necessarily, color or gender, but the best candidate. But right now it's about being given the opportunities, but they're not trusted like other individuals. And I know the owners have the right to choose what they want to do. But I mean, at least give us a realistic opportunity, because there are a lot of coaches who I know who they're frustrated with the system that they don't want to coach anymore. And that's sad.